The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. My name is Joshua Panik-Pekizik from Farm Credit Canada, one of your hosts on the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. We like to showcase startup and early stage companies, as well visit with innovators and leaders in the agriculture and food industry. Today, we are here with Joe Dales, co-founder at RH Accelerator, and guest Jacqueline Keena, Managing Director in Enterprise Machine Intelligence and Learning Initiative, or Emily, and Fred Wall, Vice President at Farm Credit Canada. Jacqueline and Fred, thank you for joining us today. Jacqueline, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Joshua and Joe. It's nice to be back on the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. It feels like a different part of the pandemic now, much more optimistic. So it's great to be here and great to be able to talk about some events and activities that are in person and sort of getting back to, I think, what we're used to and we're most a fan of. So my name's Jacqueline. I work at Emily here in Manitoba. As you said there, Joshua, the Enterprise Machine Intelligence and Learning Initiative. Our work is to grow the digital agriculture ecosystem in Manitoba, across the prairies, and really into Canada with some of our partners. So what does that look like? To us, that means accelerating the adoption of intelligent technologies like AI and machine learning across agriculture, production, processing, marketing, investment, and beyond, and also working with startups to make sure that they're really growing and scaling here in Canada and making the connections they need to be fully integrated into agriculture so that we get the benefit of their expertise, and also we can really make sure that those technologies are well suited for the problems and the opportunities that agri-food has here in Canada. We also do a fair bit of work around skills and talent as the industry keeps growing and evolving related to intelligent technologies. The skill sets that we need in the industry are also changing. And what we're seeing across all industries, and agriculture is no exception, is a pretty significant gap of skills and talent and labor in the industry. So we're working pretty hard to make sure that we are able to attract people from diverse backgrounds and diverse skill sets into the industry. And if all three of those things go really well, the last thing that we're working on is capital enablement, to make sure that startups and companies have the capital that they need and access to resources and mentors to keep scaling and growing here in Canada so that we can benefit from all of that innovation and expertise being cultivated here in the country.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for introducing yourself. Fred, can you tell us about FCC and what you're doing there?
Yes, Joshua, Joe, thank you for having me here today. It's good to be on the other side of the table, Joe. From, I think, my last time on here, I was helping you interview actually Ray Bouchard, who's the chair of the Emily Initiative. I'm very excited. So as Joshua, as you mentioned, yes, I'm in an executive role here at FCC, Vice President of Marketing and Digital Agriculture. Of most interest, I think, to the viewers of this podcast, one of my teams is the amazing Ag Expert team, where we have Canada's largest platform for producers, helping them with their accounting and field record keeping. And of course, we're thrilled with the success there. As well, I lead our initiatives in the smart farming space and the digital agriculture space. So if something is about advancing the industry in a digital way, I'm likely to be involved with that, which is part of why we're here today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Fred. Always a pleasure to chat. Jacqueline, really want to dive into this new Innovation Farms initiative project that you've launched. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It sounds very exciting.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. It is super exciting. I'm feeling like I got to make sure that I'm going to sit still here on this podcast and sort of stay in the frame of the video. I'm getting used to being back in person and moving around a little bit more. So the Innovation Farm project, we launched this in the spring of this year with great support from Farm Credit Canada and powered by Ag Expert is how we refer to that project now. And we're super excited about that partnership. It is a really incredible amplification to what our original vision already was, and a really meaningful way to connect to Farm Credit Canada, this large organization with long history in Canada, really working on behalf of producers and in collaboration with growers, which is the really important part, I think, of our Innovation Farm project. So what is Innovation Farms? We have also partnered with a seed grower here in Manitoba on their 5,500 acre operation. And so the farm continues to operate as a commercial entity. And what we want to do as a part of that project is fully censor those 5,500 acres. A sensor in every field is sort of our ultimate objective there, whether it's weather information or soil moisture, pest and disease surveillance. We really want to be able to exemplify and show off to people all across the industry and those who are less familiar with agriculture about what the current level of technological sophistication already is in agriculture. I think you'll sort of hear throughout, how we always talk about the Innovation Farm project, but certainly through my comments today, that we have a couple of goals there. And some of them are focused towards people who are already in agriculture. And it's about advancing the level of technology being used, increasing people's comfort and confidence with those technologies, making space to test and validate and see what works in a full-scale commercial environment, and see what kind of needs to go back to the drawing board and iterate a couple more times. That's one sort of stream of objectives. The other is to use a full-scale commercial environment to really show and highlight what is going on in digital agriculture, how incredible it is, how important it is for the agriculture industry, for Canada, and really for the world when we think about food production. And that is also, of course, targeted at people in agriculture, but then beyond that, also targeted at people who have less familiarity with agriculture. I think that has kind of become even more topical in the course of the pandemic, where people were more interested to see, hey, where's my food coming from? And why isn't it on the grocery store shelf as readily as I'm used to? And so we want to make sure that we're doing a good job also of highlighting some of the findings and outputs of the project to people who are less familiar with agriculture. So on 5,500 acres, sensor and really use those sensors to help tell that story about productive capacity and sustainable practices. And like I say, the level of technology already being used on farm. And then one other interesting piece on farm is about 100-acre carve out, maybe growing that over the course of the next couple of years, but using that space to test and validate new innovations and startup technologies on this farm. As we have been working at Emily over the last couple of years, one of the things we found was that people and startups and people with new innovations, whether they're researchers or existing larger companies, access to commercial and full-scale environments to test and validate new technologies was a big gap. Testing and demonstrating at a test plot level is an important component sort of in the journey of innovation and commercialization. But there's a step that comes after that, and the need to get into full-scale commercial testing is really important. It's important to be able to demonstrate to producers that this works in a commercial environment before they take that risk of integrating into their operation. But it's also important from a capital perspective to be able to show potential investors or other customers that this thing works in a full-scale capacity. So that's what we're trying to make more readily available. And from a nonprofit or, we're not the commercial entity perspective, trying to make that more available to people so they can keep growing their businesses.
Can you tell us about the Innovations Farm being valuable to the industry?
Yes. So Joshua, Joe, let me tell you about my dream a little bit first. So I want 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now, I want other countries to look at Canada and say, wow, they have figured something out there. This Canadian model is cool. How do we be more like Canada? How do we imitate? And this is when it comes to ingredients, the implementation of ag technology, the development and nurturing of that, and the ability to bring new talent into the industry, new ideas, fresh ideas. So when I first heard this proposal from Emily, I saw the dream start to take a bit more shape. I got very excited. Jacqueline was talking about potentially vibrating off camera. She knows my reaction when I first heard this proposal, because this was something unique. I haven't been able to find anything quite like it in the entire world. So the mix of smart farm and full-scale commercial. And then the way it hits on three themes, Joshua, hugely important for me. So Jacqueline touched on all of these, but the first piece, so valuable. What do I hear from my ag expert customers all the time and FCC customers when it comes to technology? Well, why should I use this? Does it work? Am I just effectively a tester for a technology company? Those are great questions. My customers are really savvy and they want to know that. To be able to answer those questions well, I need places where we can put that technology to real test at a commercial scale. And that's what the Emily Group has done here with Innovation Farms. That's the first piece. Second piece, as Jacqueline mentioned, if we're going to lead the world in innovation, in ag technology, food technology, and I think we can, we need unique, well set up, well supported areas to test that technology. As Jacqueline said, this one might not be ready for prime time. On the other hand, another technology, we might say, hey, this works great. And all of a sudden we got a place where we can show producers and investors. And then the third piece, Joshua, and this is very important to me, is around that talent and the bigger picture of talent. So frankly, one of the things I love about Innovation Farms, it's got a cool factor. This is something genuinely different in Canada, in the industry, really in the world from what I've seen. And it's got a cool factor. I can't wait to talk to people in the industry about it. But more importantly, I can't wait to talk to people who aren't in the industry about it and say, this is cool. You're going to want to be part of it. And we need those stories to tell, or we'll end up whining together at workshops and conferences about talent that isn't coming to the industry. So I was going to say in short, but it's not in short. In long, that's part of why when I heard this proposal from Jacqueline and Ray, I had to jump on board.
Great vision, Fred. Thanks for showing leadership and driving this innovation agenda. Jacqueline, if we're looking at success, what impacts do you want to make with this? What do you want to accomplish? Who's involved? And then how can the industry support you? What do you need?
Yeah, these are good questions. Thanks, Joe. What does success look like? I think there's probably success in a couple of different buckets based on some of the things that we've talked about. Of course, we want to make sure that startups have what they need to keep growing and scaling. It kind of breaks my heart when you hear of a person from Manitoba or from Saskatchewan or Ontario or wherever in Canada, and they're talking to you from California because that's where they've relocated, whether it was access to talent or capital or what. Also schooling sometimes there's lots of reasons why people migrate around the globe. But for as much as it depends on us, I want those technologies and those people to be able to build and innovate here in Canada. So if we can put some of those tools into their hands so that they can keep doing that here, so that we can benefit from their expertise and innovation, and that can help to propel our agri-food industry, that's one of the key objectives of success for this project. I stutter there because it's hard to measure, but seeing the tangible examples of that really is going to be one of the key successes of the project, is that people's innovations, their expertise are able to keep growing and flourishing here in Canada, and that through access to Innovation Farm, whether it's testing or validating or even just profiling and highlighting that innovation, even if it's already fairly developed by the time it arrives at the farm, but being able to highlight it to people and further it in Canada, that's markers of success. Through that profile, being able to connect them with whether it's ag tech accelerator groups here in Canada or access to capital so that they can keep growing, that's another marker of success. I also think profiling what digital agriculture actually is currently capable of and sharing some of that vision for, as Fred expressed, how this can grow in Canada, profiling that to people who are not already engaged in the industry. That's another big one for us. People talk about industrial revolutions. People talk about us being in one right now, the fourth, maybe related to intelligent technologies. Each one of those in history has created more jobs because humans have gotten more productive and more efficient at things that are able to be automated. That's where I think we're at right now. So I'm not worried about computers and AI taking away jobs. I'm actually more concerned with us not being able to keep up with how productive we're going to be able to be, and sort of being able to shift those skill sets in time to keep up with that. I don't think it's daunting. I actually think it's a really incredible opportunity to be able to make sure that here in Canada, we are able to be that front runner in agriculture around the world. Maybe a conversation for another day, but Canada does have this great reputation as a global leader in producing safe, nutritious, effective, sustainable crops and agriculture and food. Ultimately, that's known around the world. And so as we're in the midst of this transition, how do we make sure that we're able to stay in that, top spot amongst other leaders? Part of that objective is to be able to profile what's going on in digital agriculture to people who are less familiar with what's already going on in the industry. And I think about that for all the ways in which we're going to need more diverse skill sets and backgrounds for people who work in the industry. I work in agriculture. I go to the field sometimes, but in large part, I'm actually not there. And I'm talking to startups and tech accelerators and people in post-secondary, and a really cool project. We get to work with some high school students and show them what's going on in agriculture, and all the way into angel investors and venture capital. So I share that to say there are lots of kinds of jobs for people who have all sorts of different passions, from math, social, liberal arts, computer science, technology, all of these different kind of things. They have a spot where they can be applied in agriculture. And as the industry continues to evolve, we will need them. And so part of what we can do on Innovation Farm is just show those opportunities and show how they get enacted in the industry, so that hopefully we can plant the seed and really start to make the case for people who have different kinds of passions to end up in agriculture. It's a really resilient industry where there's always going to be important work to be done. And I think profiling that has never been more important than it is right now. So that's some of the markers of success for Innovation Farm. And I think, to Fred's point, ultimately, it's about raising that profile for Canadians and showing how incredible the industry is and what it can become as we keep working on it.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Fred, for sharing that information. Before we head out, is there anything you would like your viewers to know?
Yes, I've got a couple things, Joshua. I would just say, anyone curious for more, I've got a pretty active LinkedIn profile. When we have new things in digital agriculture, happy to talk about that. I also want to mention in October, the terrific Ag Enlightened show is coming up in Winnipeg. And I'm really looking forward to it because it has content, speakers that you can't get anywhere else in Canada. So I know I'm very excited to be a part of that, and I'd ask others to pay attention to that as well.
Well, I can piggyback on.
Yeah, is there a URL or anything, Jacqueline, on the event? For
sure. So it is agenlightened.ca. It's coming up on October 20th in Winnipeg. We're offering it as a hybrid. It was 2 years of virtual, so we've gotten pretty good at that element of it. So we're expecting a great group of people, a really diverse group of stakeholders all along the ag value chain, from producer, processor, marketing, investment, researchers, students. That's what we've had represented in our audience for the last 2 years, and I'm sure that this year is going to be very similar. The purpose of Agriculture Enlightened is to profile the most relevant and timely information about agri-food technology and data in a Canadian context. And so this year, as we're finally able to get together in person, we really want to talk about Canada's digital agriculture opportunity. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity, innovation in insurance, the smart farm initiatives across Canada, and with some of our friends from the US, and really just an incredible time of bringing together key leaders and talking about the most relevant topics, but also getting together a diverse group of stakeholders, because our ultimate objective here is to get people talking and collaborating across Canada to all be able to seize this digital ag opportunity.
How can our listeners connect with you online?
Well, Fred mentioned his LinkedIn, which I've got to endorse. That's the place for the most up-to-date information. For Emily, we're on Twitter at Emily_Canada, and LinkedIn as well as another place to find us, Enterprise Machine Intelligence Learning Initiative. That's the best way. We have a newsletter as well. You can hit up on our website, which is emilycanada.com, but Twitter for sure is the place to find this info. Thanks very much.
And Joshua, for me, I mentioned my LinkedIn profile. I welcome connections there. The other thing I would say, because we haven't been able to say this much over the last couple of years, I'll be at the Ag and Enlighten show in Winnipeg. Would welcome new connections there for anyone watching and that I may not have met yet in the industry. Would love to make some new in-person connections there. So nice to say now.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. And thank you again for Jacqueline and Fred for joining us.